Can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you?
So I am Biddle, and this is my daughter, Finley. She is 6 years old, and she just started school this past year in kindergarten. So that's been a fun change for us. But since her diagnosis, it's just been her and I at home.
So tell us your name and how old you are.
My name is Finley and I'm 6 years old.
When did you find out you were expecting a child?
I think it was around like March of 2018. Totally unexpected. So I had been told by doctors that I was not able to conceive naturally, very slim chance. So I wasn't expecting a positive pregnancy test by any means. It wasn't planned. It wasn't, on my radar at that time of my life.
Can you share some of the emotions and thoughts you had when you first found out you were going to have a child?
Lots of mixed emotions. Super excited because all my life I'd always wanted to be a mom, and then with my own personal stuff, getting told that might not be possible naturally was a whole different thing. So I just knew that it had to have been an act of God that I was pregnant, but also scared. I knew I was going to walk the road alone, as far as the only parent in the situation. And so just the thought of becoming a single parent, I was 23 whenever I found out I was pregnant. Hadn't finished, my college career yet.
I love to play with my dog Gizmo and I love to ride my Jeep.
At what point did you learn that Finley would have MPS1?
Started figuring it out around when she was 4 months old. So, I always felt like there was something that was kind of not right. When she was born, initially in the delivery room, they put her on me, and I noticed her right foot was like, instead of sticking out straight, it was completely turned in. And I was like, oh no, like what is this? And they thought, they said, it happens to a lot of kids. It could be club foot. But she had full rotation, like the newborn hearing screen. Never passed it, like in the hospital. They tried twice and she never passed. And so we got referred out to audiology to follow up and get, another hearing screen to see where she would stand. I don't know. But she was sick every month, had like double ear infection and upper respiratory. So she was on antibiotics every month for the first 4 or 5 months of her life. And at first I kind of chalked it up to the fact that she was born in October, so we're hitting that like peak, flu, RSV, like all the cruddy stuff that kids get, I noticed that there was like a spot on her back and like visually you could kind of see it. And I think I kind of just blocked it out for a little bit. And so I brought it up to my PCP. And she wasn't like new to the practice. She had also been my pediatrician whenever I was younger. So I knew she had a lot of years and experience under her belt. And, she just told me, she was like, all babies have a weak spot in their lower back. It's nothing to worry about. Well, as Finley grew, it became a little bit more prominent. Like, I'm just going to take her and get a second opinion at a children's hospital in Indy, because at the time we lived in Terre Haute. And so I called Riley and got her into an orthopedic specialist there. So our first appointment, they did some x-rays and stuff, and we left there with the diagnosis of positional clubfoot, congenital scoliosis, congenital kyphosis, and double hip dysplasia. So we left with the Pavlik harness also. Before I got home from that appointment, which was only an hour drive, I got a call from one of the physicians there himself, and he said, hey, I brought this to my, some of the attention to some of my colleagues, and we believe your daughter may have a form of a skeletal dysplasia. Don't Google it, but we would like to see you back here next week to be seen by a geneticist and get you some, more answers. So we go the next week to see the geneticist, and they do, scans of her whole body, x-rays of everything. I don't even remember everything that they did. I was kind of in a daze. And they pulled us into this room, 6 or 8 people in there, and I walk in there and I'm like, this is overwhelming and this is kind of scary, like, what's going on? And they said, well, after reviewing all of your, all of the scans and stuff, we believe your daughter has a form of MPS. And I was like, what's that? And they said, mucopolysaccharidosis. And I said, what? You're wrong. I was like, how often are you wrong? I was like, because I can tell you right now that you need to add this to your list. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And they were like, we're not usually wrong. Wow. Okay. And I said, so what am I looking at here? What, mucopoly, whatever you said, what am I looking at with this? And they said, well, it's a rare genetic disease, no matter what type it is. They said, but we believe that she has type 1. And I said, okay. And they said, and that one does have treatment options, but no matter what form you have, there's no cure. You need to, we'll draw labs today and get a urine sample, and then we are going to send you to Cincinnati Children's because we just don't know enough about it. We had another appointment with our PCP for 6 months. And I brought it up to my PCP's attention. I was like, yeah, she has MPS. And she was like, I was like, look at her back. And she was like, oh yeah, that's bad. I'm thinking it has been a month, maybe 2 since you have seen her. Don't try to act like now that, it's so concerning for you. But also in their defense, she told me, she was like, I think we cover maybe a page of it in medical school. And that's a problem, so it's frustrating because late diagnosis does my child no good. It should have been on the newborn screening. It is now, but at that time, the state of Indiana failed her.
What was this, it kind of got lost in there. What was the time frame? Because you said it 4 months.
Honestly, a lot of people will know specific diagnosis date, and that is something that I have blocked so far out of my mind. And I don't want to dig through the paperwork to find it. And yeah, so it was March, April, between all that time we were in Indy, Riley, and, obviously awaiting results and getting sent to Cincinnati. And I want to say that we started going to Cincinnati in April.
So around 6 to 7 months of age is how old she was when she was formally diagnosed. Good. Do you know the name of the disease that you have?
MPS1.
What kind of doctors or nurses do you see?
I don't know. Hand doctors, eye doctors, hip doctors, back doctors.
So how did you go about figuring out what treatment option was best for Finley once you got the diagnosis?
So when we got the diagnosis and we started going to Cincinnati, we got a lot more information because, I had obviously gotten on Google like everyone tells you not to do, and you see all these things that are awful, and, it's a whole different world. But when we actually established with Cincinnati and we were able to meet with the genetics team there, and then we started seeing all the other different specialists and just kind of getting all of our baseline testing done, and she also started ERT as we established with Cincinnati, just because sooner you start some form of treatment, the better off they are. And so I knew that I was okay with that. But they gave us the options of, untreated entirely, just ERT, which is, the weekly infusion of enzyme replacement therapy, or a bone marrow transplant. And, they gave me success rates and this and that, and I couldn't tell you what those are now. I knew that I had to do something. I knew that I wasn't going to just take this for what it was and not fight for her and not fight for her to have a life, because I knew if I left her untreated, it was set in stone that the odds of her surviving past 10 years of age slim to none. And I thought, that's not an option for me. Like, she deserves the world. So we're going to do that. We're going to do what we have to do. But I also knew that ERT solely isn't enough. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. And so I chose to go with the transplant. And there's, when you're signing the papers for a transplant, they tell you the percentage of mortality rate. And I remember, like, specifically what room we were in at the hospital, on what floor, like, the whole setting. I mean, I can visually picture all of it, and her telling me these things, and I was like, signing my life away right now. Like, I might be signing my child's death certificate and not even know it. She did great with her transplant. I'm thankful for that, because while we were there, I saw kids that didn't. I saw kids that ended up really sick. I saw kids that didn't leave with their parents. Finley definitely had complications during transplant. I mean, she wasn't like just to fly through it. There could have been worse complications, I mean, there was one night when she kind of became unresponsive. Like, she was just laying on me lifeless. Like, her heart rate was through the roof. Her breathing was insane, and her temperature. And she just was like, didn't even have the energy to open her eyes. Wasn't moving. So they drew cultures and they started her on a broad spectrum antibiotic, and come to find out she had a very antibiotic resistant strain of E. coli in her bloodstream. It was a scary 24 hours. I remember sitting there in that chair with her laying on me thinking, like, I might not walk out of here with her tomorrow. Like, this might be the time that I feared the most. Like, that this isn't, this might be it. Like, she was not okay. So,
How many days did you stay in the hospital? Do you remember?
I know we were there from the beginning of June until mid-August. However, her transplant that we had scheduled initially, like the transplant date, she had also tested positive for rhinovirus at the beginning of, like, our inpatient stay. And they gave us the option of, do you want to go back home for 2 weeks and then come back and then we'll readmit you? I was like, no. Like, we're staying here. We'll get used to what hospital life is like. Like, she had already had her, like, central line in. And I was like, no, we're going to just stay here. Like, it's too much to even think about. I've already unloaded everything. And the odds of us going home and, being around people is, we'll catch something else, like, let's just stay here. So it did push all of our dates back 2 weeks. So she ended up getting her transplant on July 17th of 2019.
The day, like, so you'd already had thoughts whenever she was having this complication that you may not be able to walk out of the hospital with your daughter.
Mhm.
Can you describe the day that you got discharged and you walked out of that room and you walked down that hallway with those nurses singing and clapping?
I didn't think it was ever going to come, I just thought, because I always tried to be very, like, realistic with myself, and you always want your kid to be the exception to everything. And you kind of go through a honeymoon phase of that once you do get past transplant and all of that. But, I just remember thinking, like, when are we going to get discharged? And, how's this going to happen? And then when they gave us that discharge date, and I had been trained for, doing tube feeds because she had an NG tube for ever and ever and ever, learned how to drop a tube, all those things. I was like, let's go. Like, we are going. And I just remember feeling so overwhelmed, but also like I wanted to run and scream and jump up and down and do cartwheels if I could do them, like down the halls of the hospital. It just felt like, man, like we made it. It was like we made it this far. Like, I knew we weren't ever going to be out of the woods completely, but just like that's a big milestone to hit for discharge day. I mean, like I said before, there's some kids that don't leave that hospital. So it was just so exciting. It just kind of felt surreal, Finley, on the other hand, did not love the parade down the hallway. I mean, she was like, what is going on? You got to think she's been in a hospital room, and while there was a lot of people in there all the time, but like these people are screaming and singing and hollering and, shaking all these different instruments. And she was like looking at her, I'm like, oh, what are these people? Like, And I remember we got to the end of it and I rang the bell and they all go, yay, Finley. And you could see her just, and just like loses her mind crying. But like I couldn't help but like laugh and cry happy tears, because I was like, she was just overwhelmed because she had never experienced that, crazy part of life. And I was overwhelmed and happy and loved to see her cry for, like you take in all those small moments, even if it is your kid crying, it's the ability that your kid has to cry right now, to feel emotions and all of those things.
How did you feel like, the security of leaving the hospital, and now it's up to you, like all medications, monitoring her, taking care of her?
I was kind of one of those moms that I was very hands-on when we were in the hospital, like doing as much as what they would allow. But I was definitely a little bit apprehensive, because when you're there, you press a call white and someone comes running, something goes wrong. And so I was a little bit hesitant, but I knew that I had the ability to do it. Like I knew that like, I'm one of those people that like, you tell me I can't do something or you give me a task and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and I'm going to overcome whatever obstacles there are. So I knew that I would be resilient in making it happen. But thinking like, okay, like now I got to make sure the meds are right on the right time, like right dose, right everything. But I will say they had everything set up pretty well, to make it as accommodating as possible between like the home health and all of that stuff. And I learned how to do her feeds, while we were there and all of that. And I remember her getting sick all over the bed after one of her feeds. I had to strip the whole bed. So I had to move to the other bed. And I thought, I can't do this all day long. I can't wash sheets 5,000 times a day, because that's how much she was puking. And so then I got smart and put a chuck down and put a blanket on top of it and kept her on that. And then, realized she needed to lay down for 15 minutes before trying to sit up after ending her feed. And she would still vomit, but it wouldn't be as much, And then if she did get it on anything, I just changed the chuck and changed the quilt and the bed was still made. So, you learn different things that work better for your schedule. But I will say one thing that didn't change was our night and day time. Like Finley still slept all day. She'd like to be up at night, but she slept a lot when we were there too. So,
Do you take any special medicine or do you have any special treatments that you do?
I have a fusion and I take medicine every night.
How does your infusion make you feel?
Good.
It makes you feel good?
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe the treatments and interventions your child is currently undergoing?
So right now, Finley is getting the weekly infusion, the ERT. So we did 8 ERT post-transplant at a certain, I think it's like day plus 30 or something, whatever the protocol was at Cincinnati at that time. But it's always been in the back of my mind to think about like, should I keep her on it? and me and some of the other moms that had kind of like transplanted around the same time, or, we talked about it and they're like, yeah, we've had the same thought too. But like at that time, like post-transplant life is just a whirlwind. You're always, trying to keep your kids safe and trying to make sure you're going to the appointments and doing this and doing that. And, Finley had a tube in for, I don't think she got it out till like March of 2020. So she had it in for a good little while, And then I thought, I don't have the mental capacity right now to even think about like getting her back on ERT right now, what that would look like. So I just kind of put it on the back burner and knew I would come back to it at some point, So probably it's been a little over a year now. I think it was January of 24 that I really started kind of like deeply diving into the idea of restarting ERT. And I had spoke with our genetic counselor often and emailed back and forth. She sent me different like literature. I spoke with some of Finley's other physicians, like what was, their thought process on it. Like, did they have an opinion one way or the other? Like, however that went. Went to North Carolina to meet with Dr. Munzer. Talked with him about it, got his opinion on it. Had a phone call with Dr. Orchard. Talked to him about it. Pros, cons. What do you think? I talked a lot with the doctors and took everything they took into said into consideration. And really the only downfall that I saw was that my kid's going to have a weekly infusion. But in the grand scheme of things, of everything that my kid has gone through and will go through, that's not the end of the world, And if it's going to better her life or her quality of life, why not? Check that. So I said, let's do it for a trial basis. And at first, one of the doctors said 6 to 12 months. And I thought, well, 6 months isn't really long enough. Like, I want to do it for at least 12 months and see how things go. But what had happened was, too, I probably ought to add this. They do the urine gag testing. And then they also do the donor testing for, like, through blood. And her donor cells were coming back at 100% donor cells. Great. She's been 100% donor cells for a long time now. But her urine gags, like, slowly elevated. And then, like, we got back another one and they were, like, more elevated than the last time we did them. And I was like, what's going on? Like, why? It would make more sense if her donor cell percentage was going down, urine gags were going up. But donor cells were 100 and urine gags were still going up. Nothing that was, like, overly, like, oh my gosh, but, like, way outside the, like, realm of normal for. And so I was like, okay, like, maybe this will help that. Like, will it help? Like, is her body not really getting enough of the enzyme? Does she need, what's going on? So we're going to trial it and see where it goes. At first, infusions were rough, starting back on them. She's old enough now to tell me, like, ow, that hurts. No, I don't want this. Like, please let me go, as I'm holding her down to, get poked. Even when it was her port at first. I mean, her port was 2 weeks post-op when we started infusion, so she was still tender. I just knew, like, I could do this for her. And she'll tell me, like, you're such a great nurse, Mommy. You're the best nurse ever. And she's so thankful that we can do infusions together, me and her, So it's been a good decision. And I just kind of followed my gut. Like, every decision that I have made for Finley throughout our entire journey has been me following my gut instinct.
Have there been any significant mental milestones or setbacks?
I mean, I guess one of the big things as a post-transplant, like reaching that like time where you get out of your bubble, that was pretty cool. Except ours was extended because of COVID. COVID happened when she was like not very far from getting out of her bubble. I was like, great. But on the plus side, we handled COVID well because we'd already been living that lifestyle. Like, I know, like, orthopedically, she has a lot of issues. But I mean, like, everything else is, for the most part, pretty well. We are coming up on the hip surgery, so that's going to be a whole different ballgame. But I guess one of her setbacks too, though, has been like knowing of her cervical stenosis, which limits her from doing a lot of the things that kids like to do, you know? Like she was in gymnastics and her neurosurgeon was like, no, okay, you know, so it's just one of those things.
What are some of the day-to-day challenges you and Finley face with this disease?
I would say the biggest thing, right now she's struggling a lot with, and it happens in all of our kids for the most part, but the trigger fingers. That's been happening a lot more lately, and it's becoming like a daily thing now, which is frustrating for her too, because like last night she told me, she's like, Mom, this finger's stuck. And I said, well, just pull it out. Just, it hurts. I can't, and so it's like to know that like I can't do anything about that for her is frustrating. To know that I can't do anything about any of her situation to take it away or, make it any better as far as from a medical standpoint, that's hard and it weighs on my mind definitely every day. Right now, Finley's at the age though where it doesn't really clicked with her yet. I mean, I've told her that she has MPS and I'm very open, very honest with her about anything that she has coming up. Are you getting shots? Yes, you are getting shots. Are you not getting shots? No, you're not. I don't wait till we get to the place and then say like, oh yeah, by the way, you gotta get, shots and a blood draw. Like she knows before we go in. She definitely has a lot of anxiety from that kind of stuff. And I think that's a thing, like for us as parents, that like we have to realize that our kids feed off of our emotions. Like I remember, obviously at first when we got diagnosis, I don't think I ever stopped crying until the point where like my body could literally not produce any more tears. And then you go through like the stages of like a grieving process, basically, you're sad, you're mad, you're, all those things. I went through all those kinds of stages. But I remember at one point I said to myself, like, I guess like I got to get it together because like my kid needs me. So then you go into fight or flight mode and push through what you got to push through. And I don't think I've ever come out of fight or flight mode. I don't know if any of us ever do. Maybe like taking it down a couple notches. But, it's one of those things that us as parents like don't really get to process our emotions appropriately, for sure. But I remember going into transplant. My mom was there with us for the transplant, and I remember telling her before we went to Cincinnati, I said, listen, I know this is going to be hard. I know what we're about to get into is going to be nothing we've ever done before. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be sad. We're going to be scared. I'm scared. But here's my one rule. We're not going to cry in front of Finley. So if you feel like you got to break down, walk out of her room. But when we're in there, we're holding it together. We're putting a smile on our face. And she was only 9 months old when she was transplanted. It doesn't matter what age they are. They still feed off of your energy.
How's your child's condition affected your daily routine and dynamics?
It's changed my life 180 for sure. I quit school, going for my dream job of being a nurse, and started taking Finley to where she needed to be. And then, now that's what my life revolves around, which most parents' kids, their lives revolve around their kids. But being a single mom of a medically complex child, it is a lot different. So my schedule has to work for what works best for her. So, she goes to school 3 days a week. Do I love having to drive 45 minutes one way to school? Absolutely not, but it's best for her. So I arrange my schedule to fit it. Do things when I can, but 95% of the time she's with me. I think that what a lot of people don't talk about is how much it can emotionally affect a parent. Like I said about like, you're not really processing or dealing with your emotions. And I know like when you're going into transplant, like I remember being offered therapy. I was like, yeah, I need therapy. Like, thank you. No, but really, I was like, I know I need therapy, but like, I don't have the capacity to even think about 2 hours from now, let alone think about my emotions and what I'm feeling today and yesterday and tomorrow. And I was like, no, I can't do it. But that's one thing that I think a lot of people can benefit from, even just, because it does change your life so much, and you just have to figure out like how to roll with this new lifestyle. And you can't really move forward unless you learn to deal with some of those things too, So I've definitely benefited from adding therapy into my crazy schedule.
Are there any specific moments or events that stand out as particularly challenging or rewarding? Either or.
I knew they referred us to Cincinnati. I knew we needed to go there for a transplant. And I thought, how am I going to make this work? How financially am I going to make this work? And of course insurance will pick up on that. But it's a very but then it's not even just that part of the financials. It's obviously you can't work when you're there. You know what I mean? Like, I stopped school. Figuring out how to do life differently when you're faced with those times where you can't, bring that money in, or, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? You just have to, that's definitely one of the more challenging situations, like as far as for transplant goes. And not all MPS parents may want to venture to other hospitals and stuff, but like getting into these, specialized hospitals to see, the doctors that are well versed in MPS can sometimes be a huge challenge. A lot of it's insurance based, and, the fighting with the insurance to get you to go here, or, just thinking about like how you can make all of that work. How do you get your child the best care possible for what makes sense for you? And sometimes, and I haven't run into that specifics. I mean, I have, but it's been fixed now, but like, I have been told no, that like we couldn't go to one of the main doctors that most every MPS parent wants their kid to see because of an insurance barrier. So I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges. The rewarding thing though is just knowing that I'm doing it all for Finley, I guess. Just seeing that her like flourish in life. So all the challenges that we face, no matter what, it's always a win for me because Finley's getting exactly what she needs.
How has this experience affected your emotional and well-being as a parent?
Okay. So it's definitely made me emotionally detached, I would say. Like personally emotionally detached. There are times where like before all of this, I was very like in tune with my emotions. I was a crier at certain things and, whatever. And now I'm like, I don't know if I know how to cry anymore. And not really, like, obviously there's times where I cry, but I've just found myself like less and less emotionally involved in certain situations, because I have to put on this brave face and I have to go into fight or flight mode, and like I can't let my emotions get the best of me. Like, if I let myself feel every emotion that I feel, I would lay in bed for 2 weeks. Like, you just can't do that. And I always want to prioritize Finley and her emotions first. And I want her to know that it's okay to express your emotions. You need to express your emotions. Tell me why you're sad. It's okay to cry. Like all of those things. And I find myself, but like not doing those myself, So It's definitely taken a toll on my well-being, for sure. Therapy has been helpful. Medications, it's one of those things where, like, I wasn't medicated for this kind of stuff until after diagnosis and everything that, the turmoil that it wreaks havoc on your life, for sure, and you have to be healthy, mentally and emotionally healthy to be able to, do what you need to do for your kid. And I've been in therapy for a couple of years and I'm still not, like, ready to process everything. But I found that I can talk about Finley's story and talk about the things that we've been through and not be angry anymore, because I used to be angry at any person that posted that they were having a baby and that their baby was healthy. And I'm like, why you? Why not me? Like, why your kid? Why not mine? It's not fair. Life's not fair, But you have to understand that doesn't really get you anywhere. You know what I mean? It doesn't benefit you or your kid. So I let myself be that way for a little bit.
But how do you cope with the stress and emotional toll?
Therapy and talking about it. I have people in my life that I can talk to, but sometimes it's frustrating to talk to, your family or your friends about something because they can only understand to a certain perspective and they don't even really wholeheartedly understand. And, so sometimes people will tell me, like, oh, well, it'll all be okay. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that it's all going to be okay because you don't know that, like, depending on what situation we're talking about. So talking to other people who have also walked the same path or are walking the same path or, just people that get it, people that live in our world, our own community. There's that MPS community and finding comfort in that and being able to talk to people who truly get it has been very wholesome. Very, very, very beneficial too. And like I said, I talked to my therapist about stuff and it's easier to talk to her about some of this stuff than it is to talk to my friends and family because she has no emotional connection to any of it, and she's a total outsider. So it's easier for me to express my emotions to her and she's not like, well, it'll be okay. Because she's like, she knows, like, that's not what I want to hear.
Did you get involved with the MPS community at first?
Yes, I joined the groups. I added some people. I did not become active in it. Like, I would just, like, at first, you're just so, like, your head's still, like, spinning around your neck, you can't focus on any of it. But I remember that the first MPS mom that I met in person was Charlotte, Titus's mom. So Finley and Titus had the same first day of ERT. And so I remember her carrying him so little into our room and Finley and I were laying there and, because he was diagnosed much younger, but, like, that was really good. It is a little bit terrifying to get involved into the MPS community at first, especially because when you first get involved, obviously it's upon diagnosis. So, like, you have 5,000 other things on your plate and 10,000 other things in your mind and, like, thinking about talking to somebody else. So at first I just did what I could and I just, like, kind of watched and listened and, but now, yeah, like, I have found that, like, just getting involved in the MPS community in general, just coming to events and, going to conferences and, reaching out to them, whoever you want to connect with in the MPS community is really, really important. But everybody's different. So, like, I think getting involved to whatever extent feels good to you, yes. But definitely, like, join the groups, friend the people on Facebook. Like, they'll reach out to you, and whenever you want to reach out to them, you reach back. Or if they don't reach out to you, then you decide you want to reach out to them, do it. Whenever it feels good for you specifically. Like, I'm not saying every family that's newly diagnosed needs to get on and add every single group and, make a post in every group, but sometimes that's how they find comfort, and that's how they, get some reassurance. And I think I was too scared too. But I wish I wouldn't have been too scared too. Like, looking back now, I'm like, I wish I would have, asked some more questions or reached out to more people. But I was just like so in denial, I think, still, that I just couldn't bring myself to do it,
Have you received support from family, friends, or support groups? And how has this support impacted your journey?
We have a great support system with inside my family and my friends and the MPS community. I mean, just in general, it's kind of amazing the amount of support that we have. Especially since we moved here, being closer to our family, hands down the best decision I think that we've ever made as far as this part of our life. I was terrified to go to my first event where there was going to be other MPS families. I was like, can I do this? Can I handle this? And you just get there and you just feel this presence of just love and acceptance always, and Finley just adored everything about everybody there and the kids, and I don't know, it's just, you just kind of feel like you're at home. It just feels like these are my people, right? So yeah, the support has been a blessing for sure in ways that I can't even begin to fully describe.
What do you think the public should know about families dealing with MPS?
I think they should see us as humans, not just parents that have kids with, a disability or whatever. Our kids are different than the average child as far as what their physical abilities and everything is, but they're not different as far as they should all be accepted, I think that people need to give MPS families some grace too, because, I've had people tell me, like I said, it's all going to be okay, or, don't do that to yourself, or, all these different things. The advice that they try to give is not really what people need to hear. So I think they just need to be more educated, I guess, on what MPS is and what all it really entails, and just kind of take all of that into consideration and see us as just a family with some kids that need a little bit of extra love. Yeah, Finley looks like she's doing great, but the daily struggles of trying to get her to sit down long enough to write out the homework that she needs to write before her fingers start, sticking, cramping. Her wrist needs a break. She can only run so much, it's, I don't see what the insides have.
What are your hopes and dreams for Finley's future?
Well, obviously, what every one of us is going to say is that she's cured in her lifetime, Is that possible? Yeah, it is. I want her to live a long, happy life. I want her to be healthy and happy and thriving and able to do everything and anything that she wants to do whenever she wants to do it without restriction. I want her to have a family of her own. I want her to travel the world and, I want her to just be successful and mainly just happy, But, there's always that, devil on your shoulder telling you, like, but the reality of your child's life is this, you know? And so I have to hold on to hope. I have to hold on to faith. Even if she doesn't, like, just telling her story and getting it out there and making people aware of what MPS is and, like, how desperate we are for a cure. If that could help another kid, another family, save someone's life, like, develop the cure and, you know, cure the rest of the children that are born with it, like, that's a win. Like, for sure.
If you could give advice to other parents in similar situations, what would you say?
My biggest piece of advice for parents is to follow your gut. And I know we touched on that earlier, but literally listening to my gut instinct is what got Finley diagnosed. If I would have just brushed it off and thought I was being, you know, over dramatic or whatever, I don't know when I would have gotten Finley's diagnosis. So you push for what you feel is right, and you might have one doctor tell you that you're crazy, or one doctor tell you there's nothing wrong, but, like, seek out people that can give you true answers, like, valid answers. They can explain themselves. They can, you know, they listen to what you're saying and give you answers based off of, you know, that. Because sometimes the doctors will literally just brush you off. And I'm like, no, but you need to hear me. And if you don't get the answer you want, keep going. Keep going until you get an answer that sits well with you. Even if it might not be the answer that you want, you know that you did it for good purpose, because then you can move on from that and get your child the care that they need, the treatment they need, the surgery they need, whatever it is. So follow your gut instinct throughout the whole process. Just don't stop fighting for your kid. Fight for them to be seen by the best of the best, no matter what, you know. Because we've been multiple places seeking out expert opinions, you know, not just the local hospital down the road, you know. I mean, I just think my biggest advice is to follow your gut, because you're always going to make the decision that you feel is best for your child, no matter what. So don't always listen to the outside noise.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your journey, or anything you feel is important for others to know?
Just for them to know that they're not alone, you know, especially, you know, being newly diagnosed and you feel like your world's being turned upside down and smashed into a million pieces and the hope for the future's gone, and, you know, all these things. I mean, I felt those things, you know. You're not alone in feeling those things. But there's a lot of support in the MPS community. A lot of us have been there, and, like, let us help you. Let us help you through this journey. You don't have to do it alone. You know, you don't have to be, it's terrifying for sure. But there's so much, I don't know how to explain it without sounding crazy, but there's so much joy and love and hope in the world of MPS kids. You know, I mean, they're just fabulous together. Like, it's just like that breath of fresh air that you always need every time they get together. I'm just like, I feel like I'm over the moon, you know? So just lean on the people that are there for you. So when I first found out that the life expectancy of a child with MPS1 and being untreated was around age 10 to 12, I felt sick. You know, I just felt like I was in shock. I was mad. And I just felt like that, like, this can't be true. You know, like, I was just overcome with emotions. And just the thought of that just made me just want to shut down, you know? Like, I can't go on. But then you learn to fight. And I decided, I'm not taking that as an answer for my kid. We're gonna seek out our options, and she's gonna live past that with treatment.